The council says all Libyan officials, such as those at the United Nations, who have, quote, joined the revolution, end quote, are considered legitimate representatives of the council. Libyan officials at the UN have broken with the Gaddafi regime, including Ibrahim Dabashi, who's been working as Deputy Libyan Ambassador at the United Nations. He joins us now live on the phone from New York. So do you now speak, Mr. Dabashi, for the Interim Council?
Certainly. I am speaking for the Interim Council, yes.
So does that mean, though, that anything you say represents the official position of that council and should be taken as such?
No, it depends on what I am talking about. There are matters that they have already taken a decision on it, but certainly I express my own views. But mainly it reflects the views of the Council.
Who speaks for Libya now at the United Nations?
Excuse me?
Who speaks for Libya at the United Nations now?
We all the missions staff speak on Libya's behalf at the United Nations. It's starting by the permanent representative, Ambassador Shalgam, me as deputy permanent representative, and all the other staff, all of us. We are speaking on behalf of the Interim Council.
Right, but we understand Colonel Gaddafi has now nominated a new representative at the United Nations who will be credentialed by the United Nations if and when he arrives.
I don't think the United Nations, the member states of the United Nations will recognize any ambassador nominated by Gaddafi anymore.
But have you spoken to the Secretary General or anyone else at the UN about the Interim Council now speaking for Libya at the United Nations?
You know, the Council had been meeting only yesterday. They made a statement, and certainly yesterday and today it is a weekend, and tomorrow we will start speaking about the decisions of the Council and the next step to be taken by the United Nations with the Secretary General and all member states of the United Nations, and especially the member states of the Security Council.
And clearly it's a critical week. We just heard from a leader of the opposition in Libya. They're calling for surgical airstrikes and a no-fly zone. Does the Council have a unified position on these sorts of issues?
No, what I know, the Council is in favor of imposing a non-fly zone. I think it is also in favor of jamming the communications of Gaddafi and between Gaddafi and his field commanders. But really, I don't see any decision by the Council to ask for surgical aerial attacks.
But as far as jamming communications equipment in a no-fly zone, might you, on behalf of the Council, be making a formal representation to the UN Security Council in the coming days?
We are asking. We have already officially asked for the imposition of non-fly zone.
Help us understand, though, whether you've already made contact then with international actors such as the United States and others to recognize the Council as the intermediary now. I mean, certainly the State Department today said it was in touch with the opposition. Does that mean it's in touch with the Council, or does it mean it's with you, or does it mean it's still not entirely sure who it's speaking to, it's just speaking to people who are against Gaddafi?
Anyway, we have our ambassador of the United Nations, and he got a new letter from the Council that he is representing Libya and the United States. So certainly I believe that the U.S. administration will speak with our ambassador in Washington.
But clearly, though, the British didn't get the memo that there was now a unified transitional national council. Do you understand why they felt the need for such covert links to the Libyan opposition?
I don't understand exactly what do you mean.
Well, I mean, obviously there was some confusion then, and clearly amongst international actors about who represented the opposition in Libya. Are you clear now that the international community will now recognise your council and those who claim to speak for that council as the sole representative of the Libyan opposition?
No, anyway, the council now is the main. He is the opposition, the official opposition. I mean, he is the organ of the official opposition in Libya, and I think there is a national consensus on the provisional council. Yes.
Ibrahim Dabashi, thank you very much. And we will be interviewing other Libyan officials in the coming hours to try and understand exactly what the makeup of this council is and who those who are now claiming to be speaking for the entire opposition are. AlJazeera, meanwhile, has learned that at the United Nations, Portugal is to chair a committee on the sanctions package mandated by last week's Security Council resolution. It's expected that José Felipe Moraes Cabral will be named head of that committee on Tuesday. To discuss what those sanctions could achieve, we're joined from New York by James Traub. He's a foreign policy analyst and contributor to both the New York Times and Foreign Policy magazine. Do you feel sanctions then will be effective as the international community struggles to come up with some kind of response to what's happening in Libya?
I doubt it. I mean, I think the Security Council has been remarkably swift about meting out those sanctions against Libya. That's almost unprecedented for them to have acted as quickly as they have. And those sanctions include asset freezes, a weapons ban, referral to the International Criminal Court, and so on. And those are all the right things to have done. God knows they can't hurt. They're unlikely to be able to either deter Gaddafi or to seriously diminish his capacity to make war. I think one thing they can do in coming days, that the Portuguese can do, is first they can add some additional names to those people who are named individually to make it clear to them that they will suffer as a consequence of continuing this war. And they can much more seriously implement the enforcement of those sanctions, possibly through the use of naval assets to prevent, for example, ships carrying weapons for the Libyans.
But what about other concrete measures that might be announced as further meetings take place?
Well, look, what's the next step? Clearly a no-fly zone. Is there a willingness to do that? Would the Russians and Chinese approve of that? I don't know. I question whether that would be effective. If you've been reading these accounts, by far, the most casualties that the rebels have suffered have not been as a result of air attacks. They've been as a result of ground attacks. And even leaving aside the logistical difficulty of mounting a no-fly zone, you can easily imagine the horrifying situation where all these pilots from NATO are up in the air watching Gaddafi's forces slaughter people on the ground and unable to do anything because they're not using helicopters or planes to do so.
Right, so I suppose what I was asking was...
that raises the next level question.
Yeah, no,
yes?
Go ahead. Yeah, I think you're about to ask the question. Go ahead.
The next level question was, what about surgical airstrikes? That, I think, is an interesting question to contemplate. They're not talking about that right now. You can see where that would cause a lot of upset in the Arab world. I would like to see the Arab League be an authorizing agency for that. If the Arab League said, we need airstrikes, then it would be much more difficult to portray that as some kind of neo-colonial Western attack upon the Muslim world, which otherwise people fear would be the way this is explained.
But I mean, our sense is certainly from speaking to various actors that there's no will to get involved because such airstrikes would discredit the revolution, even though, actually, just a few minutes ago, we did hear someone calling for airstrikes, which, again, is the problem in understanding who the opposition actually is. Without, though, the military action being on the table at the moment, then, what else, then? I mean, then what about oil sales, money still going to the central bank, for example? What about humanitarian corridors? What about all these other concepts? Might they all somewhere be in play?
Okay, so talk about oil sales. One interesting suggestion with oil sales is right now, as you rightly say, all of the oil that's sold, whether the rebels control the refineries or the government does, goes to the government. Would it be possible to establish an escrow account, for example, such that all that money went not to the government but to an escrow account, which could then use that money for humanitarian